Welcome. This presentation is an opportunity to examine Vermont's core teaching standards and progressions. The standards and progressions make good teaching great.
Hi, I'm Jay Hoffman, and I'm proud to have served as Vermont's 2013 Teacher of the Year. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the new Professional Educator Standards, Vermont's core teaching standards.
Is that like Common Core?
Oh, I was about to say that.
Well, it's not Common Core, but it's got a lot of connections. Just like students need to have proficiency skills that you're working on, so do educators.
Oh, that makes sense.
The education landscape has changed dramatically over the last decade. The resulting shifts have been positive in many respects for educators across the country. Educators are shifting their practice in exciting ways today. Professional teaching standards help us articulate this new vision for teaching in Vermont. Our goal is to create an aligned and coherent approach that builds on the standards for the preparation, licensing, and professional learning of teachers. Let's begin by considering where these standards come from.
We last adopted standards 20 years ago. Remember cassette tapes? Our standards were based on the Intasc standards and were focused primarily on the needs of new educators.
The new Intasc standards, written for all educators, not just new teachers, represent a new vision for effective practice to empower student learning in Vermont. We're transitioning now from the Apple book to the Tree book, away from the 16 principles to the new core teaching and leadership standards. We know it can be tricky to keep track of all the standards and to understand how they all relate. Here we see student standards are the central focus of our work. And the core teaching standards define how a teacher can best support students in meeting the Common Core and other student standards. The core leadership standards support high-quality instruction and, by extension, student learning. Teacher and leader evaluation guidelines then support effective evaluation systems. Finally, the professional learning standards work in conjunction with evaluation systems to promote effective professional growth. Ultimately, the standards remain distinct but function together to create a coherent system organized around the needs of students.
Another way to think about these standards is to imagine that the student standards are the what teachers are supposed to be teaching. The core teaching standards define how they can do so effectively.
Some of you may be asking, why are we calling them the core teaching standards? The term core highlights the close connection between the teaching standards and the Common Core state standards for students. The core teaching standards, however, are applicable across endorsement areas. They align with the Common Core state standards and the next generation standards, as well as with our existing framework. When you review the new standards, you'll see that they have a new emphasis that better reflect the needs of today's schools.
They emphasize personalized learning for diverse learners. This aligns nicely with Vermont's push for personalized learning plans, as we see in Act 77. A stronger focus on application of knowledge and skills. Just as we're demanding more in terms of knowledge and skills from our students, we are for educators as well. Improved assessment literacy. How we assess students has grown much more sophisticated over the last 10 years. Educators need to understand data and assessment much more deeply than was expected in the past. A collaborative professional culture. Gone are the days when an educator could go into his or her classroom and shut the door. And finally, new leadership roles for teachers and administrators. Administrators can't do it alone. The core teaching standards support educators in taking on new leadership roles while allowing them to remain in the classroom. The 10 standards can be divided into 4 categories. Our first category focuses on the learner and learning.
Effective teachers have high expectations for each and every learner and help all learners reach their potential. Next is content knowledge and skills. Effective teachers have a deep and flexible understanding of their content areas and use differing perspectives to engage learners. This is followed by instructional practice. Effective teachers understand and integrate assessment, planning, and instructional strategies in coordinated and engaging ways. Finally, are the standards focus on professional responsibility. Effective teachers engage in meaningful and intensive professional learning and self-renewal. It's worth noting that the content knowledge and skills category also encompasses the knowledge and performance standards of your individual endorsement areas. It's depicted as larger than the other categories to emphasize its centrality to the work of educators. The categories are further explained by performance and knowledge standards and critical dispositions. Performance indicators are included first because they are the aspect of teaching that can be observed and assessed. Essential knowledge indicators describe the knowledge necessary for effective practice. Finally, critical dispositions describe the habits of professional action and moral commitments that underlie the work of educators. We do not have the expectation that an educator will meet every performance or knowledge indicator. Teachers are professionals who grow over time, not superhumans. The standards are not checklists. To support educators in working with the standards, the VSBPE chose to adopt the Intasc learning progressions. The progressions are a lens for viewing the core teaching standards. Let's take a closer look. For now, let's focus on one standard, Core Teaching Standard number 5. It can be overwhelming for an educator to know where to begin. The progressions break Standard 5 down into several parts. The core teaching standard itself is at the top. Remember all the indicators in Standard 5? The progressions take all these performances, knowledge, dispositions, and combine them into just 3 or 4 indicators. The developmental progressions move from left to right, from less to more sophisticated teaching practices. Here you can see levels 1, 2, and 3. The progressions are not rubrics. Instead, the progressions are meant to be used as part of a formative and supportive improvement process to help teachers become more effective. The shifts underneath the progressions briefly describe the changes in knowledge and skills an educator would need to move from level 1 to 2 and from level 2 to 3. Finally, at the bottom of the progressions are illustrative examples that describe concrete ways an educator can improve his or her practice. Now, it would be easy to say that this is just one more thing on top of everything else we see in education these days. Instead, the core standards and progressions are a way to support teachers. No doubt you'll be hearing more about these standards from student teachers in your schools, mentors, and administrators. They're already part of the relicensure process, and we hope you'll see them reflected more and more in your professional learning communities.
I'm Rebecca Holcomb, Vermont Secretary of Education. At the Agency of Education, our commitment is to continuous improvement of teaching and learning. With that in mind, we're very excited about Vermont's new teaching standards and progressions. They're very exciting for us because there's 2 big changes we see taking place in the field. First of all, when we look at teaching, we're shifting our focus from what teachers do to what students do. What's the actual impact of our instructional choices on the students and on their learning? That's what we're here for. The other big change that's taking place in the field is we're not thinking of looking at teaching just in terms of evaluating teachers' ranking and rating, but we're really focusing hard on what we can do to support continuous growth and professional development for our teachers so that over time they become more and more effective so that the learning of our students is even better. That's what our goal is, and that's how we hope you'll use the new teaching progressions and the new standards.
Don't forget to check out these great resources if you want to learn more. The Vermont Agency of Education webpage, where you can find the Tree Book and a copy of the Progressions book. You can also follow the Vermont Standards Board for Professional Educators on Twitter.